Hello, it's Trevor here again, and thanks for tuning in. This film's all about picking the most relevant articles as part of your literature review. In a previous film, I've gone over how to use Google Scholar, and you can see from the screen here that I have used Google Scholar to identify a number of articles that are useful potentially for my literature search and literature review. So these are my keywords in the search box here, so environmental impacts of mycelium, and Google Scholar has gone away and found 37,600 results for me. Now obviously I can't read all of them, and not all of those articles will be particularly relevant to my particular specific literature search and literature review. And before I do too much work in reading and analyzing these articles, I want to make sure that I'm getting the most appropriate articles. So you can see I haven't set a date range, or I could sort by date if I'm interested in that, but because I'm starting out, I don't know much about this topic. I want to get a broad sense of the feeling of the ideas about the environmental impacts of mycelium in my case. So I'm going to choose the articles here. I'm just going to click and download them. Perhaps I might need to go to my university website to get past any paywalls, as I've explained in a previous film. But I'm going to take this article here, the first one, environmental impacts of this mycelium production, and a few others in the list. So I'm just going to spend 5 or 10 minutes. I won't bore you with that in the movie right now. But I'm going to choose perhaps 10 to 15 of what I think are the most relevant, just purely looking at the title, the date, and this very short synopsis of the article. Then I'm going to go to my university library, online library catalogue, and download the articles as part of my subscription to the university library. So imagine we've done that now. So I'm going to have in my possession, I'm going to have downloaded these 15 articles that are relevant to the keywords and the other criteria that I set in Google Scholar. So I've basically whittled down from 37,600 articles that Google Scholar thinks are relevant to me to these 15 that are really very specifically relevant to what I am looking for in my literature search. So here are the 15, and just to give you an idea, here are the next stages of what I will be looking at in those 15 articles. Now I won't have time to read all the articles that Google Scholar has found for me, so I'm going to focus on the 15 that I think are most relevant, and this is what I'm going to be looking at to filter those that I think are worth me reading in full. So how do I go about that? Well, firstly, I look at the journal and I think, is this a high quality journal, and how can I tell that? Well, there are a few indicators. I happen to know from my experience that Elsevier here is a reputable publisher of academic journals. It's not what we call a predatory journal, so the authors in a predatory journal quite often have to pay to get their articles published. I know this journal and this publishing house doesn't do that. So in this journal we can see at the top it's called Agricultural Systems, and I'm fairly sure that this is reputable because other indicators to me are telling me that it's been around for a long time. So this is the volume number is 138. That means there's been 138 volumes published of this journal. So that's been going around for a long time. And this article was published in 2015, and then these two numbers here show the page numbers of that particular journal issue where it was published. So to help me further, then, that's a reputable journal in my gut feeling. I'm next going to look at the title. So how closely does the title represent what I'm looking for? So I use the keywords environmental impact of mycelium. So you can see those words are in the title. And this, therefore, is very specifically linked to my search terms. So this seems to me, just from the title, highly relevant. So because this title is so relevant and so similar to my search terms, I would probably leave it at this for now and come back later when I've done this analysis on all the 15 papers that I've chosen. I would go into more details and read the whole of this paper. But if I show you another one of the 15 papers that I've downloaded after my search, you can see that this title isn't exactly matching my keyword search, but it's pretty close. So my keywords were environmental impacts of mycelium. So this is using waste in producing biocomposite mycelium bricks. So not quite as close as the previous paper, but still there's mycelium there. It's talking about waste, it's talking about producing biocomposites, so I know that that is fairly close. But again, this journal, Applied Sciences, I would need, if I want to be absolutely sure this isn't a predatory journal, to go to the Applied Sciences Journal website and check the instructions for authors, and if there's any hint that the author has to pay to be published, then I wouldn't take this any further. But let's assume that this is a reputable journal. I can see that the authors of the paper are working for different universities, so that indicates that they are more likely to be reputable authors doing reputable work. After all, if they're working in a university, that university probably has ethical considerations for researchers to follow. So that's all indicating good stuff. The next thing to look at is have a quick skim read of the abstract, and how does the content as summarized by the authors in the abstract actually match up with your search terms. So I can see that the content of this abstract, after I skim read it, is talking about things, explaining things that are relevant and interesting to my literature review. So I would keep this in my list of articles that I want to read later on. Here's a third example of another paper, again by the publishing house Elsevier. Yeah, and this is the title, so I would look at that. So Elsevier, I trust as a reputable journal publisher. The journal itself is Materials Today. I know that's been around for a long time, so it's, in my opinion, a reputable journal, so that keeps it on the list. Now, how closely is the article to my literature search terms? So let's look at the title here. Sustainable Packaging Applications from Mycelium to Substitute Polystyrene, a review. To me, that sounds very relevant to my search terms. Don't forget environmental impacts of mycelium, so we're along the right lines. These again are authors that are working in educational institutes in India this time. So let's have a look at the abstract. Let's read the abstract, and I can see from that abstract that it's again describing things that are really highly relevant to my literature review. So again, I would keep that on the list of papers that I need to skim read initially and then perhaps read in more details, making key notes of the insights and the key points in the paper. But I'll explain more about that in another movie. Thanks very much. I hope that's been helpful at identifying the searches that you find, the search results that you find from Google Scholar, identifying the most specific papers that you think out of that search term, perhaps limit it to 10 to 15 papers, and then look at each paper and specifically think about the title, how reputable the journal publisher is, the journal itself is, and the authors are, and then focus on the abstract and see how relevant that is to your literature search. Thanks very much. Bye for now.